Cut through the noise here. What do you think is happening?
Well, I mean, to be frank, I do think that this looks on the face of it like a retaliation for the unionization in Quebec. Quebec has some of the strongest labor laws of any province in Canada, and workers at one Amazon facility have unionized and secured a collective agreement. And so, with Amazon's reputation as being quite an anti-union employer, this is not a surprising outcome, as unfortunate as it is.
There have been similar stories in the United States, correct?
Correct. There's one facility in the United States, in New York, on Staten Island, that has unionized. But because the laws are much weaker there, there's no contract in place yet. So those workers have been officially certified as a union now for some time, well over a year, and have not been able to secure a contract. You can't delay in the same way here in Canada, especially in Quebec. And so they've secured a collective agreement, and Amazon's response, it looks like, has been to move out of the province or shift to a model that depends on contractors instead.
When you hear the NDP and others saying this is union busting, I mean, my understanding was there was a move to form a union. They were not quite there yet. So, I mean, how did that all kind of play out?
No, they were there. I mean, it has been secured. There are efforts to, expand that, of course, into other facilities. But this very much looks like Amazon's response to the union, as much as they may claim otherwise. In all likelihood, although I don't know the union's strategy, they will very likely file some sort of labor complaint against Amazon, and that will be determined. And it will be up to Amazon to demonstrate that this closure is not in retaliation for unionization, which I think will be a pretty tall order.
Yeah, so because some people are curious, are they allowed to do this? Is there nothing the Quebec or Canadian government can do? Walk us through what that might potentially look like based on what you're saying.
Yes, well, the union can file an unfair labor practice and try to demonstrate that this is retaliation. And in that case, it's up to the company to demonstrate that it's not retaliation. So the onus is on the company, not the union, to demonstrate that. And, in past cases, for example, Walmart did a similar thing in Quebec, and the courts found that, in fact, that was retaliation for workers unionizing. So you could see a similar outcome here. The challenge, of course, is that often, even if the courts side with the union and the workers, it's cold comfort because they don't get their jobs back. The company is not forced to recognize the union and bargain, but they do usually provide some sort of compensation. So we'll see how this plays out, but as of now, it looks like a real uphill battle for the union.
Yeah, and it gets a bit confusing, as you're rightly pointing out. There are a number of facilities that Amazon has in Quebec. One of them was unionized, the other ones were not, but they may have wanted to unionize, and so this is a way, to basically stop that from happening. Whether or not Amazon was trying to do that, of course, they say they weren't. The union says they were. Those employees, what happens to them now? Those 1,700, or let's say if you factor in the seasonal folks, close to 2,000 employees.
Yeah, so for those workers, unfortunately, they are out of a job, and I think it's important to keep in mind too that Amazon is not pulling out of the province in the sense of not doing business there. They are shifting to a contracted model. Now, they already run their delivery services based on a third-party contracting model and claim they're not the employer of those delivery drivers. So it seems to me that they're suggesting that they want to do something similar with their warehousing facilities. Now, I'm not entirely sure how that would even work, but that does seem to be what they're suggesting. So conceivably, you could see workers who were in these facilities, even the unionized facility, being forced maybe to reapply to contracted jobs, likely at substandard levels of pay, and of course without union protection.
You talked about Quebec having some of the strictest, toughest labor laws on the books in Canada. I'm curious whether you think this could be a sign of things to come possibly elsewhere in the country.
Yeah, well, certainly there are other unions in other provinces that have been trying to unionize Amazon. I mean, Amazon is really considered a kind of litmus test for the labor movement. This is a very large employer with a very prominent anti-union record, not just in Canada, but around the world. And I think for a lot of unions, they're really treating this as a kind of existential test about whether or not you can unionize these facilities and improve the working conditions, because Amazon really is kind of dragging down the conditions in warehousing and logistics because of how poor the pay and conditions and how bad the health and safety is. So, for example, in BC, you might see something similar. Unifor is trying to unionize there. BC also has a law that requires employers to bargain a contract within a year after certification. So it won't surprise me to see similar things play out across the country.
Adam Donald King joining us from Winnipeg. He's a labor union analyst. Appreciate you taking the time on this one today, Adam. Thank you.
No problem, anytime.